What is a river? We've all encountered rivers in our lives. We've swam in them, boated on them, fished in them, drove alongside, and crossed them by ferry and by bridge. Think about a specific river. What springs to mind? What makes it special? Maybe it's a river that you have a close personal connection with, or maybe it's one you've only read about or seen in the movies. Rivers play important roles in society. They provide an identity and image for cities, regions, and even entire countries. They connect places and ideas that may seem disparate, urban centers with the countryside, industry with riverside parks, the past with the present. They play pivotal roles in the transportation of goods and people. They are sources for water and food, and far too often they have been a disposal ground for our waste. Rivers define the landscape they flowed through, shaping communities and ways of life along the way. This video tour of Riverworks, Whistler and the Industrial Thames takes you on a riverside journey. My name is Justin McCann, Lunder Curator for Whistler Studies. Compared to the other great rivers of the world, the Amazon, the Mississippi, the Yangtze, the 215-mile Thames is tiny. With its source in Gloucestershire, England, the river runs down the Cotswolds and flows through such historic English cities as Oxford and Windsor. It is a pastoral river for much of its course until it flows into London, where it transforms into an urban industrial river before emptying out into the North Sea. The Thames has played a significant part in the history of London. During the 19th century, the city was the capital of the British Empire and the financial center of the Industrial Revolution. This video will explore the 19th century Thames and its ties to industry, commerce, and the British Empire. In 1859, the American artist James McNeill Whistler made London his new home, and over the course of the next 40 years, he made hundreds of paintings and prints of the River Thames. Shortly after getting started, Whistler ventured into East London and into the riverside neighborhoods of Wapping, Rotherhithe, and Limehouse, communities with close economic ties to the Thames. Whistler made his first etchings of the river from these neighborhoods, depicting its bustling commercial life. Works like Thames Warehouses, Black Lion Wharf, Rotherhithe, Eagle Wharf, Limehouse, and later works such as Wapping the Pool and the Tiny Pool shows the Thames teeming with activity. Laborers abound, ships clog the river, cargo is unloaded and loaded, coal is delivered. Workers congregate and smoke, taking a break from work or waiting for it. Whistler views lead the eye along the river, jammed packed with ramshackle wharves and warehouses, where goods coming from various parts of the empire would be accounted for and stored. It was this part of the river, known then as the Pool of London, what we today would call the Port of London, that was at the heart of the economy of the British Empire. The industries along this part of the river supported national and international trade. We can think of the Thames then as a global waterway. Taken together, Whistler's etchings of the river provide a portrait of a key node in Great Britain's global imperial economic system of the 19th century. We'll now move from east to central London and the Thames at Westminster, the home of the British government. If the Pool of London was the economic heart of the British Empire, then the river passing by Westminster was its political one. This portion of the Thames underwent significant infrastructural change in the middle of the 19th century to improve its navigation and sanitation. Traffic congestion and water pollution were major concerns for Londoners. In the early 1860s, Whistler made a few etchings of Westminster Bridge, a river crossing next to the Houses of Parliament. At the time, it was being rebuilt, and Whistler shows the new bridge in scaffolding. In one view, Whistler depicts the bridge from afar, and Parliament can be seen on the left. In another, Whistler gives us a rather strange perspective from beside and slightly under the bridge. Bridge construction was a hot topic in London at the time. During the 19th century, London grew exponentially. In 1800, 1 million people called London home, while by 1860, the population had increased to 3.5 million. The city was congested, and the river was filled with vessels. Crossing the city could take hours. As a result, bridge building boomed in London. Bridges facilitated traffic across the river, making it quicker and more efficient to travel and connected communities socially and economically. Bridge building was also one of the foremost and most respected engineering achievements of the 19th century in Britain. It's no surprise, then, that bridges feature frequently and prominently in Whistler's images of the Thames, not to mention the fact that Whistler's own father was an accomplished engineer who built bridges and railways in Russia and the United States. No doubt Whistler had a close affinity for bridges and their construction. Just down the river from Westminster Bridge was Old Hungerford Bridge, and the subject of one of Whistler's most ambitious etchings. Old Hungerford Bridge, built as a pedestrian crossing in 1845, was already outdated and overcrowded a decade later. It was demolished in 1860 to make way for a railway bridge leading to the newly constructed Charing Cross railway station. In this etching, Whistler depicts the footbridge coming down while the railway bridge is going up. Amidst this construction site, hundreds of people line the pier to catch a steamboat, while barges transporting coal and cargo ply the waters beside them. In addition to thinking about the River Thames as a highway, it was also sadly a sewer. The population growth of London in the 19th century not only affected the navigation of the river, but also its cleanliness. For many Londoners at mid-century, their waste was emptied directly into the river. By 1858, the year of the Great Stink, when the river was caked with sewage, the government and other reformers finally moved to action. In both an effort to alleviate traffic, improve navigation, and clean the river, a set of interrelated infrastructure improvement projects, the construction of an embankment, a sewer system, and new bridges radically transformed the river at Westminster. The goal was to make the Thames and its shoreline beautiful and clean, in addition to being an effective means of transportation. In other words, a river fit for an imperial capital. So far, our journey has taken us from the Pool of London to the river beside the seat of British government in Westminster. Whistler understood the symbolic, economic, and political significance of the River Thames. Even prior to living in London, Whistler had spent considerable time with two other famous rivers, namely the Neva in St. Petersburg, Russia, and the Hudson in New York. In London, Whistler lived along the Thames at Chelsea, in a house that overlooked the river. It was from this house that Whistler made many of his most famous views of the river. He often hired someone to row him along the river as he sketched, and many of his views include the factories across from Chelsea at Battersea. Chelsea in ice is a great example of Whistler's work along this stretch of the river. In early January 1864, a sharp frost hit London, and the Thames partially froze over. The gray and white color scheme give the painting a feeling of gloom and cold. Barren trees line the riverbank, and a steam-powered passenger ship navigates through the ice that zigzags across the river. In the distance, a gray solid mass of factories along the Battersea shore, underscoring the bleak, frigid conditions. In the foreground, pedestrians stop on the Chelsea side of the river to admire the spectacle of a partially frozen Thames, a rare occurrence and a sight to behold. Chelsea in ice exemplifies Whistler's interest in the atmosphere of London's air. When we think of London's air in the Victorian period, we conjure up the famous London fog. What exacerbated the fogs and turned them into a serious public health crisis was smoke from coal fires. Coal played a defining role in the daily life of Londoners in the 19th century and fueled the economy of the British Empire. Works like Chelsea in Ice and Early Morning Battersea focus on depicting the atmosphere, the air and light at a particular season or time of day. The seemingly natural effects that Whistler notes are not in fact natural at all. Coal smoke and other pollutants filled the air of 19th century London. Factories and homes were dependent on coal. Whistler himself owed payment on 6 tons of coal in 1879. The beautifully rendered paintings and prints of London's air and fog that made Whistler well known bear a significant environmental history. Whistler may have effaced specific details in these artworks compared to his earlier works, but the smokestacks and the overall atmosphere show how Whistler's art speaks to the larger system of environmental and economic imperialism of the period. So what is a river? Looking at Whistler's images of the Thames, we see it as many things: a highway, a catalyst for a global economy, even a sewer. Rivers have long played a part in shaping society and in inspiring artists, and the river near you has a story to tell that is unique, but that also connects with other stories and other places, past and present.